will hear a number of different recordings, and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 sections. Write all your answers in the listening question booklet. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Section 1. Section 1.
Recording 15C.
OK, so it's Millie's turn to give her tutorial today, isn't it?
That's right. I'm going to talk about renewable energy sources, and specifically solar towers. I'm not sure how much you already know about solar towers, so I thought I'd start with a few questions. First of all, does anyone know how solar towers work?
Don't they somehow use the sun's energy to create electricity?
Yes, in a way. They actually work by using the sun to make columns of hot air that rise upwards through the center of the tower. Now, do you know how old this idea is?
I would have thought it was a 20th century idea. That's when we've had to start thinking about how to solve energy problems, isn't it?
No, I read something about this last week. The first time solar energy was produced was in the 17th century, wasn't it?
That's right. So it's not a modern idea at all. And Leonardo da Vinci also made sketches of a solar tower, though he never actually built one. Their recent history starts really with a man called Georg Schleck.
Yes, I read about him. He's a professor from Germany, and he needed a country with plenty of sunshine and land for his research, so he chose Spain to build the first tower.
Correct. Well, everyone seems to know something about these towers.
Yes, but I still don't really understand how they work.
Well, I've made a flowchart to help you. Firstly, you have to realize that they are very tall towers. They're constructed out of high-strength concrete, and they can be as high as 1,000 feet. There's one being built in Australia that's 1 kilometer high. Now, all around the base of the tower, they have a sunlight collector, which is basically a large sheet of plastic. It extends out for as much as 7 kilometers, and it is raised off the ground slightly so it heats up the air underneath it.
So it acts like a greenhouse, then?
That's exactly right. In fact, they plan to try and grow plants underneath it as well.
So, what happens to the air?
Well, the sunlight collector heats it to 65 degrees centigrade. That's on average 35 degrees greater than the outside temperature. And the laws of physics mean that this hot air rises up the chimney, or the tower, and drives the turbines at the top. As the turbines revolve, they generate electricity. In fact, they can generate 200 megawatts of power, or enough for 200,000 houses.
Wow, that sounds impressive. But it can't all be good news. What are the disadvantages? I'll bet they're really expensive to operate.
Well, no, not necessarily, because sunlight is free, after all, so it's really only the initial outlay that is costly. After that, they're very efficient.
But what about at night, when there is no sun?
Well, they've managed to find a way to store the electricity produced during the day, so it's no problem at night, or even on cloudy days.
So there are no drawbacks then?
Ah, I didn't say that. One problem they do have is that a lot of the energy in the sunlight is lost from the collector in the form of heat, and then, of the remaining heat, a large proportion escapes from the top of the tower. But they're still worth the investment because, as I said, sunlight is free.
Hang on, if these towers are so tall, how do they cope in high winds? Surely they become dangerous then?
Yes, keeping them stable is another drawback. I believe they anchor the towers to the ground with wires to stabilize them so they're not dangerous, but it is an issue.
You have certainly found an interesting topic today, so thanks, Millie. Perhaps we can have a look at your pictures now.
Now turn to Section 2. Section 2. You are going to hear a conversation between two women about the health system in England. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 17. Now listen to the first part of the conversation and answer questions 11 to 17.
Hello, Mrs. Sutton. Come in. How are you settling in next door? Have all your things from Canada arrived yet? I thought I saw a removals van outside your house yesterday afternoon.
Yes, they came yesterday. We spent all day yesterday arranging them. It's beginning to feel a bit more like home now.
Oh, that's good. Look, come in and sit down. Are you all right? You look a bit worried.
Well, I am a bit. I'm sorry to bother you so early, Mrs. Smith, but I wonder if you could help me. Could you tell me how I can get hold of a doctor? Our daughter, Anna, isn't very well this morning, and I may have to call somebody out. She keeps being sick, and I am beginning to get a bit worried. I just don't know how the health system works here in England. All I know is that it's very different from ours back in Canada.
Well, I don't know really where to start. Let me think. Well, the first thing you have to do is find a family doctor. Sometimes we call them general practitioners as well.
Right.
And register with him or her. If you live here, you've got to be on a doctor's list. If you're not, things can be a bit difficult. Nobody will come out to you if you're not registered. Anyway, they work in things called practices. Sort of small groups of family doctors all working together in the same buildings. Now, what you've got to do this morning is register with one of them. There are 2 practices near here, so we're quite well off for doctors in this part of Manchester. There's the Dean End Health Centre, about 10 minutes walk away. And there's another practice in South Hay. That's about 5 minutes away, going towards the town centre. We're registered at the Dean End one, but they're both okay. There are about 6 doctors in our practice and 4 in the other, so ours is quite big in comparison, and the building and everything's a bit more modern. South A is a bit old-fashioned, but the doctors are okay. Their only problem is that they don't have a proper appointment system. Sometimes you have to wait for ages there to see someone. Anyway, you go to the receptionist in whichever health centre and ask her to register you with a doctor there. You have to fill in a form, but it doesn't take long. Ours is called Dr. Jones, and we've been going to him for years, ever since we moved here 15 years ago. I wouldn't say he's brilliant, but I suppose he's all right, really. We're used to him now. They say he's very good with elderly people, but he does tend to get a bit impatient with children. Listen, the one who's supposed to be really good with small children is Dr. Shaw. I've heard lots of people say that. She's young and she's got small children of her own, so you could try registering with her. And if her list's full, I heard somebody say the other day that there's a really nice young doctor at South Hay, a Dr. Williams. He holds special clinics for people with back trouble, but that's not really your problem, is it?
Now you have some time to look at questions 18 to 20. Now listen to the rest of the conversation and answer questions 18 to 20.
If you want a doctor to visit you at home, you have to ask for a home visit. You're supposed to do that before 10:30 in the morning, but obviously if it's an emergency, you can phone at any time, night or day. It might not be your doctor that comes, though. It's quite often one of the other doctors in the practice. It doesn't really seem to make much difference.
Right.
Otherwise, you make an appointment to see your doctor at the health centre. You usually get seen the same day. Not always, of course, but usually, as I say. They hold surgeries between 9 and 11:30 every weekday, and from 4 to 6:30 Monday to Thursday. Saturdays are only for emergencies.
I see.
When the doctor sees you, he gives you a prescription. He writes what medication you need on it, and you take it to a chemist's shop. There's one opposite the centre. If it's for a child under 16, you don't have to pay, so if it's for Anna, there's no problem. The same thing goes if you're unemployed or retired, or if you're pregnant. Just as well, because it's not cheap. You pay the same price for each item the doctor has prescribed. At the moment, it's something like £5 per item. So you pay for the medication, but the consultation with the doctor doesn't cost you anything. It's completely free as long as you're a resident here. You're going to be here for 3 years, aren't you?
Uh-huh.
So, well, there shouldn't be any question of you paying anything to see the doctor. So that's one less problem to worry about. Look, Mrs. Sutton, if you want, I'll sit with your daughter for half an hour if you want to go down to the health centre to register. It's no trouble, really, don't worry.
Are you sure you wouldn't mind? That would really help me a lot. I'll ask them if they can send someone round later to see Anna. I think I'll try the Dean End Centre.
Good idea. Don't worry about Anna.
Right. I'll be back as soon as I can.
That is the end of section 2. You will now have half a minute to check your answers.
Section 3. You will hear a conversation between a university student and a librarian about using the city archives. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24 on page 7. As you listen to the first part of the conversation, answer questions 21 to 24.
Hello. I was wondering if you could give me some information about using the archives?
I'd be happy to. Are you a resident of the city?
Actually, I live just outside the city, but I study at the university downtown.
That's fine. All you need to do is show your university identification card, and you can use the archives at no charge, as long as your ID card is current, of course.
Yes, it's valid. So I don't have to pay anything?
No, city residents pay an annual fee, but students can use the archives for free. Everyone else needs to get special permission from the director, but that doesn't apply to you, of course.
Oh, good. I was also wondering about the schedule. I have classes every day, Monday through Friday, and I also have a part-time job, so I could really only use the archives on weekends.
That's not a problem at all. We're open all weekend. Actually, the only day we're closed is Monday, so you can come any day, Tuesday through Sunday.
Are you open in the evenings?
Yes, we're open from 9:30 in the morning until 8:30 in the evening.
That will fit my schedule well.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30 on page 8. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30. Is there something else I can help you with?
Yes. One thing I'll be needing to see for one of my class projects is old photographs. Do you have photographs of the city in the 19th century that I could look at?
Yes, we store all the photographs in the basement. Those stairs over there will take you down to the photography collection. Just tell the librarian there what you're interested in, and he'll help you.
Those would be 19th century photographs?
Yes, the entire collection is there. Now, if you're interested in seeing documents from the 19th century, those are right here on the ground floor.
I would like to see some of those documents. Does that collection include newspapers too?
No, all the newspapers from the earliest ones in the 18th century up to the current time are on the second floor. Here, let me just give you this map of the archives, and you'll be able to find whatever it is you need.
Thank you. Oh, I see you have a whole room devoted to maps.
Yes, on the third floor.
That's great, because one thing I need to do is look at how the city has developed over time.
I'm sure you'll find a lot of helpful information there. Of course, some of the maps are several centuries old, so generally visitors are only allowed to see photographic reproductions of them.
That shouldn't be a problem. What's this on the fourth floor? Ogden's Woolen Mill.
As I'm sure you know, Ogden's Woolen Mill was the major entity responsible for the growth of this city in the 19th century. The Ogden heirs gave money for the archives to devote an entire floor to information about the history of the mill.
Will I be able to find information about the Ogden family there? Photographs, personal papers, things like that?
Probably the family photographs are stored downstairs in the photography collection. The personal papers would be on the fifth floor, where we keep all the personal papers of famous residents of our city.
Thank you so much for your help. I'll be able to do a lot of my research here.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to section 4 on page 71. Section 4. You will hear a lecturer in education talking about some experiments done in the USA to investigate the effects of reducing class sizes. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40 on pages 71 and 72. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
All over the world, there are passionate arguments going on about how educational systems can be improved. And of all the ideas for improving education, few are as simple or attractive as reducing the number of pupils per teacher. It seems like common sense. But do these ideas have any theoretical basis? Today, I want to look at the situation in the USA and at some of the research that has been done here in America on the effects of reducing class sizes. In the last couple of decades or so, there has been considerable concern in the United States over educational standards here, following revelations that the country's secondary school students perform poorly relative to many Asian and European students. In addition, statistics have shown that students in the nation's lower-income schools in the urban areas have achievement levels far below those of middle-class and upper-middle-class schools. So would reducing class sizes solve these problems? Well, we have to remember that it does have one obvious drawback. It's expensive. It requires more teachers and possibly more classrooms, equipment, and so on. On the other hand, if smaller classes really do work, the eventual economic benefits could be huge. Better education would mean that workers did their jobs more efficiently, saving the country millions of dollars. It would also mean that people were better informed about their health, bringing savings in things like medical costs and days off sick. So what reliable information do we have about the effects of reducing class sizes? There's plenty of anecdotal evidence about the effect on students' behavior, but what reliable evidence do we have for this? Let's have a look at 3 research projects that have been carried out in the USA in the last couple of decades or so. The first study I'm going to look at took place in the state of Tennessee in the late 1980s. It involved some 70 schools. In its first year, about 6,400 students were involved, and by the end of the study, 4 years later, the total number involved had grown to 12,000. What happened was that students entering kindergarten were randomly assigned to either small classes of 13 to 17 students or regular-sized classes of 22 to 26. The students remained in whatever category they had been assigned to through the 3rd grade, and then, after that, they joined a regular classroom. After the study ended in 1989, researchers conducted dozens of analyses of the data. Researchers agree that there was significant benefit for students in attending smaller classes, and it also appears that the beneficial effect was stronger for minority students. However, there's no agreement on the implications of this. We still don't know the answer to questions like how long students have to be in smaller classes to get a benefit, and how big that benefit is, for example. The second project was much larger and took place in California. Like the Tennessee study, it focused on students from kindergarten through to grade 3, but in this case, all schools throughout the state were involved. The experiment is still continuing, but results have been very inconclusive, with very little improvement noted. And the project has, in fact, also had several negative aspects. It meant an increased demand for teachers in almost all California districts. So the better-paying districts got a lot of the best teachers, including a fair number that moved over from the poorer districts. And there were a lot of other problems with the project. For example, there weren't any effective procedures for evaluation. All in all, this project stands as a model of what not to do in a major research project. A third initiative took place in the state of Wisconsin at around the same time as the California project began, and it's interesting to compare the two. The Wisconsin project was small. Class sizes were reduced in just 14 schools, but it was noteworthy because it targeted schools at which a significant proportion of the students were from poor families, compared with California's one-size-fits-all approach. Analysts have found that the results are very similar to the Tennessee project, with students making gains that are statistically significant, and that are considerably larger than those calculated for the California initiative. Now, I'd like to apply some of these ideas to the latest.